So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to continue with this new Voices Talk series on Latin American women philosophers. And today we have the presentation of Professor Viridiana Platas Benitez. It's my pleasure to introduce her. Professor Viridiana works at Instituto de Filosofia from the University Veracruzana in Mexico, and she also works on early modern women philosophers such as Anne Conway, Margaret Cavendish, and Emily Châtelet. And it's I'm eager to listen to her perspectives on the Latin American women philosophers, such as her presentation today, Manuela Sáenz, Liberty Beyond the Gender. Thanks to be here, and please, Professor Viridiana.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Pedro, for the invitation. It's a very important for us to join this magnificent project about study women philosophers in Latin America, especially in the earliest 19th century. So today I will talk about a character or a woman that has a pretty controversial life and a pretty controversial thought. So I will start reading my paper. This paper examines the meaning of the idea of liberty in the thought of Manuela Sáenz. Although Manuela was not a philosopher in the canonical sense, the traces of a political thought at the height of the radical social transformation of South America in the incipient 19th century are undeniable. The project for the formation of La Patria Grande, or the Patria Grande, La Gran Colombia. The case of Manuela Sáenz is to understand a character whose yearning for a political, economical, and moral emancipation from the regime imposed on the American nations is the same for conceiving liberty beyond her gender, and which is derived in her reflection and experience on her condition as a bastard, a Creole, and a lover. Thus, through her diaries and her epistolary relationship with Simón Bolívar, it is possible to infer that for Manuela, liberty is not an essential attribute of human beings, but rather a power that is conquered in the emancipatory act of going beyond the behavior expected by the monarchy and the male social order. Manuela Sáenz knew that to be free, one has to transgress the established order of the arbitrary rule that subjugates Indians, Afrodescents, and women. For this reason, Sáenz paid for her liberty with social reputation and exile. There is a wide range of studies on Manuela Sáenz as a character or icon of the independence of Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. For example, the classic biographies by Héctor von Hagen and Alfonso Rumazzo González, the more recent biography by Pamela Murray, as well as Mariana Libertad Suárez's study on the appropriations of the historical character for feminist novels and of the last century. And even more recent is the interest in studying the participation of women in emancipatory movements throughout the American continent, where Manuela Sáenz stands out as la libertadora del libertador, the liberator's liberator. Therefore, in order to understand Sáenz's contribution to the study of women thinkers, it is important to understand that there is no that there is no science's systematic thought, but rather the expression of an idea of liberty, which is the ideal that underlies her revolutionary action and her life in exile, and which represents a feminine point of view on social transformations in Latin America. To develop the above, two documents attributed to Sáenz, which are autobiographical sources, were analyzed for this paper. The Quito Diary, which narrates her participation in the independence of Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia, as well as her first encounters with Bolívar. And the Paita Diary, which corresponds to the end of her life in exile and where she recalls the sense of homeland, freedom, and history. Between those diaries, chronologically, there are her correspondence with Simón Bolívar, in which the emancipations of the female gender. Well, I will start with some methodological observations and a brief biographical sketch. Various criteria about being discussed for the interpretation, reconstruction, and integration of women in the history of philosophy, where one of the most frequent problems is the doxographical and fragmentary nature of the documents containing women's thought. Among other problems, the very existence of historical figures and even the scope and relevance of their opinions as belonging to a fully canonical philosophical discourse are debated. In the case of Latin American women thinkers at the beginning of the 19th century, the historical and social conditions that surrounded them made it difficult to systematize, disseminate, and even write down their ideas. Almost 2 centuries have passed since the anomalies Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz and Sor Josefa Castillo y Guevara, who were extraordinary cases of intellectual activities in the cloisters of New Spain and New Granada. The intellectual landscape of the early 19th century the intellectual landscape of the early 19th century was unstable due to the growing political turmoil. Wealthy women in the Spanish viceroyalties had no access to formal education, their only access being boarding schools and convents, where they were instructed in religious matters. However, according to recent research, there was also an intellectual climate that enriched with the Enlightenment ideas of Voltaire and Rousseau. As Vilalta explained, I quote, recent research shows nuances that need to be taken into account. Elite women were the ones who most directly benefited from the spirit of the Enlightenment. Since they could not access formal education intended only for men, they were able to educate themselves in a much more self-taught way that began to cultivate the habits of reading, debate, frequent and voluminous correspondence, and narrative in general, with a freedom that disappeared, paradoxically, when at the end of the 19th century, specific educational programs for girls were imposed, which powerfully reinforced the patterns of domesticity to which they were confined. I end my quote. Well, this allows us to understand the origin of the ideas of Manuela Sáenz Aispiru, who was born in the hacienda of Cataguango near Quito in Ecuador in 1787, the illegitimate daughter of Simón Sáenz, a Spanish politician and merchant, and Josefina Aispiru, a Creole lady from a wealthy family. Manuela was was a mother orphan at a very young age and was sent to the convent of Santa Catalina to be educated according to the young woman of the time. At the age of 18, she ran away from the convent with an officer of the Royalist army, but returned to the hacienda after the public scandal of her escape. After this event, she moved to Panama with her father, where she met her future husband. Her father arranged her marriage to James Thorne, an English doctor and merchant, 20 years her senior, with whom she moved to Lima, where she became involved with news of the independence enterprise. On May 19, 1822, she returned to Ecuador, settling in Quito and devoting herself to the cause as a conspirator and a spy. On June 16 of that year, she met Simón Bolívar, to whom she remained close as a friend, advisor, and lover for the next 8 years until the Venezuelan general's death. It is thanks to this relationship between Bolívar and Manuela Sáenz that the documentary traces were generated with which it is possible to give an account of Manuela's life and thought. Personal documents and letters between her and Bolívar, as well as between Bolívar and General José de San Martín, General Francisco de Paula y Santander, and General Antonio José de Sucre, all of these heroes of the independence wars in South America. All these letters concerning very important episodes, such as the Battle of Ayacucho, the failed conversion of Ocaña, the decline of Bolívar's power, and the dissolution of La Gran Colombia. All these documents were in Manuela's safekeeping as Hussar de la Gran Colombia, a martial distinction that implied being the guardian of the liberator's official documents. The exchange of letters with his generals and even the discussion of military and political strategies in the midst of the conspiracy and political pressure to expel Bolívar from Colombian territory. After the death of Simón Bolívar in 1830, Sáenz was expelled from Colombia in 1834, then expelled from Ecuador in 1835, and ended up in the port of Paita, Peru, where she lived in poverty. She was accompanied by her slave, Jonatas, and both died the same day, November 23 of 1856, only with hours apart. The aforementioned documents were treasured by Sáenz, and after her death from diphtheria, the authorities burned the hut with all his belongings as a measure of containing the disease. General Antonio de la Guerra, a friend of Sáenz, was able to save these papers from the rubble in a wooden chest with its embossed body edges burned on the front and one side, containing a process about Manuela and people of her sympathy, as well as her servants in Bogotá, as well as confidential documents and letters from the liberator Simón Bolívar, as well as Marshal Sucre and other documents. It is through the chronicle of Daniel Florencio Oleri, a friend of Bolívar's, and to whom Manuela allowed to consult the letters and all these documents, and especially the letters and diaries of Manuela Sáenz, that is possible to investigate the features of the thinking that animated the participation of this outstanding figure in South America history. Now, I'm going to talk about some features about politics and the battlefields. The political sphere was denied to anyone born in American soil. The organization of the colony through the viceroyalty established a social order in which power was exercised by Europeans, sustained by Creoles, and suffered by Indians enslaved of African descent. The ideas of the Enlightenment and the echoes of the French Revolution fueled Creole yearnings to forge nations independent of European power. This spirit was shared by Manuela, who, at the age of 25, collaborated with the patriotic cause as a spy, provider, and nurse for the soldiers. For these actions, which made the liberation of Lima possible, she was recognized and decorated with the Medal of the Order of the Sun, awarded by General José de San Martín. This impetus continued with Manuela's return to Ecuador. She recounts in her diary how she continues to gather information through her slaves, Jonatas and Natán, and I quote, to spy on where the Spanish fortification and posts are, and then send this information to the patriots. The end of the quote. As well as sending provision and 5 mules to the Paya Battalion, to which she adds, I quote, I do not expect them to pay me, but if this is the price of freedom, it has been very little. The end of the quote. She narrates in what is known as the Diario of Quito that in May 24 of 1822, I quote, the generals of the Patriot Army did not allow us to join them. My Jonatas and my Natán feel, as I do, the same lively interest in fighting because we are Creole and mulatto women, to whom the liberty of this land belongs. Liberty thus becomes the South American purpose and action. Purpose in that it is the main objective of the political and social movement and action, in that it is the condition that makes it possible. That is, liberty is not only the ideal of the new nation, but the means by which they emerge. But the process of liberation takes place in a political and personal level. It is well known that the story of Manuela Sáenz is largely incomprehensible without her relationship with Simón Bolívar. Historians have unanimously recognized that her commitment to the patriotic cause precedes her first meeting with the liberator. However, it's precisely the love affair that culminates in Manuela's personal liberation and her gender nonconformity. Thus, in the undated letter, I write this to speak to you on another subject, since I feel at ease having received your esteemed letter of the 5th. You see that you can be kind with me? 3 leagues are no way to you. For you, do not come to visit your most faithful friend and talk over what you tell me of freedom of speech. Do you see my deeds? Well, I will tell you. It distinguishes man from beast and marks the boundary between roaring and slender. It makes every man the actor of his own tragedy or the legislator of his country. If a word can be changed the course of history, another word in the darkness defeats the storm. Love. I ended the quote. The freedom of speech is the first manifestation of the human condition. To that extent, speech is not only a vestige of the action that transforms territories. On August 33 of 1843, in exile, poverty, and old age, she vehemently affirms, history is not told, it is made. Sáenz is aware of her role in the South American struggle for independence and her decisive role in bringing to fruition to the project of the Great Colombia, or La Gran Colombia, the founding of Bolivia and the glory of South America. Her last years are racked with the pain of her inability to maintain the Bolivarian dream of unification and freedom, as well as witness the scorn of her status as a lover and defeat rebel. Now, gender roles and the free woman. The accounts of her time, especially those relating to Manuela Sáenz, stay in Bogota after Bolivar's death, refer to her as scandalous and brazen personality, as she liked to ride horses and wears men's clothes. Sáenz knew how to build herself from the liberty of her own feminine condition, for on May 25 of 1822, she wrote in her diary, "I was born with a vein for peace and glory. Although my father, like my husband, is opposed to me being in contact with the army, all that remains is for me to do my will, which is stronger than I am." Regarding this temperament, in Bolivar's letter to his sister Antonia of January the 9th of 1823, he not only explains his deep love for Manuela, but also the motives that nourish it. I quote, "Accepted in my destiny seems to be the inescapable answer, for she, in her eagerness of service, shows herself a noble friend of a very superior soul, cultured, devoid of all intention of ambition, of a manly temperament as well as feminine. She left her home to give to the cause, and to you, dear sister, all that her has for the common good." End of the quote. It is here that the impetus of the lovers is distinguished for the commitment to the defense of the homeland. The demand to participate in the final liberation of Peru stands out, which is why on June 16 of 1824, she wrote to Bolivar, "The adverse condition which may arise in the way of the campaign you intend to conduct do not intimidate me as a woman. On the contrary, I challenge them. What do you think of me? You have always told me that I have more trousers, than any of your officers. Have you not? I tell you from my heart, you will have no more faithful companion than I have, and no complaint will come from my lips to make you regret your decision to accept me. Will you take me? Well, here I come. That this is not a reckless condition, but one of courage and love of independence. Don't be jealous. You're always Manuela." This letter precedes Sáenz's military participation in the Battle of Ayacucho, which earned her promotion to colonel of the Colombian army, hints the fact that she liked to present herself in uniform and with all the medals. It is precisely this temperament that years later was described as immoral by the people of Bogota. In that sense, there are several vestiges of Sáenz's opinion as to what was expected of her behavior. Moral prejudice are seen as mere opinions with no impact of his ability to love Bolivar and his cause. In Sáenz's letter to Bolivar of February the 12th, 1823, he claims, you may tear your heart from you if you wish, but mine no. I have it alive for you, which is for me all adoration, above all prejudices. Yours, Manuela. Also, in Simón Bolívar's letter to Manuela of June 16 of 1825, he says, morality, as you said, is relative in this world. The society that has arisen in this disastrous epoch of colonialism is pernicious and farcical. Therefore, we should not have acted, as you said, but at the call of our hearts. I am yours in my soul. The prejudices of colonialism always cast a shadows over Manuela Sáenz' life. As a bastard, a Creole, a pro-independence woman, and for this reason, action and writing are the vehicles through which gender transcends prejudice, one of the most transgressive points of which is the erotic nature of her love correspondence. As Maria Jose Vilalta points out, in the face of all the cliches that place Manuela Sáenz outside the boundaries of femininity, she herself exalts her condition as a woman redefined through the depth of the amorous encounter and the intensity of sexual ecstasies. Now, some preliminary conclusions. Great in the history of women philosophers and thinkers, methodological challenges. On the one hand, the nature of philosophical thought is expressed in different ways, precisely because of the vital conditions of those who sustain them. In this sense, the case of the reconstruction of South American women's thought at the time of independence movements can lead us to the painful necessity of justifying the demarcation criteria between philosophy, literature, and politics. In that sense, as I noted at the beginning of this presentation, Manuela Sáenz is not a philosopher in a canonical sense. Nevertheless, the forcefulness of her writing provoked me to read her diaries and some of her correspondences through the lens of the future of her thought, which is definitely a vital expression of liberty as an ideal and a philosophical ideal as an act of liberation. As Patricia Victoria Martinez Alvarez warns, Manuela's eagerness to speak out, to be heard, her conviction that what she another woman knew and said was fundamental to the lives of all people, was not only the center of Manuela Sáenz Aispiro, not only the center of her politics, but all that at the same time, because it was also the center of her love. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this presentation.